Hello, it's Sarah Cannell, and welcome back to The Rise, the show that helps you break through to your next level from the inside out. I'm thrilled that you're here today for our third episode because we're continuing to break down what it takes to rise internally. Who do we get to become on the journey to the next goal, vision, milestone, summit that we want to make, right? We're rising to that next summit of your greatness, your contribution, your leadership. And we're always on this show going to be looking internally. What does that take on the inside? And what does that take on the outside, more specifically than the extremes? The I had nothing and now I have my own plane. We talked about that a little bit in episode 1, right? What happens in the middle from milestone to milestone? What happens when we rise from summit to summit, and exactly what clues can we glean? What steps can we learn from the great thought leaders, authors, philanthropists, visionaries that have gone before us? So that's what I'm here to be, your guide through that. And I'm so honored. If we haven't had the chance to meet and it's your first time listening, again, I'm Sarah Cannell, and I am a 5-time bestselling author and the founder of Thought Leader Academy, where I have the incredible gift of helping amazing experts, coaches, and entrepreneurs like you become bestselling authors and in-demand speakers so you can change the world with your mission. And what I offer to you is your movement. Now, there is no better person that we could start our Rise case studies with, I believe, than Tony Robbins. Whether you love Tony, don't like Tony, haven't looked into his stuff, there is no question that Tony Robbins has summited many times, has risen to great levels of leadership, of contribution, of philanthropy, of making a difference on the planet. And I'm really excited to, again, we're not looking at the overarching big picture. I want to break down these rises of wonderful thought leaders in these particular case study episodes so that we can learn what our next steps might be if we want to go from point A to point B. So what we're going to do today is talk about Tony Robbins and the idea of identity. Now, why is this connected? So years ago, I had a moment where I knew what I was doing wasn't working. I wonder if you've had something like this. You just knew that if like you keep on, doing what you're doing, you're going to get the same result, but you don't know maybe what to do differently. And hopefully this show is going to be that place of empowerment for you this year to help you actually know what to do. And I didn't know what to do, but for some reason I got the impulse to listen to old Tony Robbins videos on YouTube. I don't know why his name popped in, but I call those divine downloads, right? Like there's just a nudge from life, the universe, whatever you want to call it, that says like, this is where you're going to get your next puzzle piece. This is what to pay attention to. Sometimes books have actually flown off the shelf in bookstores or libraries, or someone's emailed me or messaged me about a book, or a video link to something to watch. Or in this case, there wasn't an external, nothing flew off the shelf or message. I just got the internal impulse. Listen to Tony Robbins. So went on YouTube and started just binging a bunch of his stuff. And one of the things he talked about over and over and over and over again was this idea of that he built himself, that the Tony Robbins we saw in front of, an NFL stadium full of people breaking their hearts and minds open in one of his incredible trainings was not the same Tony Robbins that entered this planet and had the upbringing he had. And in fact, if you know Tony's story, what we're going to focus on today is the rise he made from being a 17-year-old school dropout working as a janitor to becoming a force in the just starting to have a movement in the personal growth space. We're not going to talk about his first millions or his first whatever. I'm going to focus specifically, as promised in this show, on a specific rise from point A to point B, which in this case is like how he started to build the new identity. And so remember, we can enter our rise externally or internally. We can enter the rise from a space of mindset, which is what Tony did, or we can enter it through taking action as the new version of ourselves, which is the true version of ourselves, right? We're not actually becoming someone else. We're becoming who we always were meant to be. And we're letting go of the shackles and the lies and the false ideas and the limiting ideas we picked up along the way. That's my belief. Okay. So why identity? So I kept hearing Tony talk about, I had to build myself into someone new. And I thought, wow, he just sort of referenced it in all these videos, like, well, I built myself, I made a new identity. And then you listen to all kinds of other personal growth people. And in fact, if I can, I'll link to this show notes, the video montage we did at our Women Starting Movements event, where we kind of put together all these thought leaders that say, make a new identity, build the new identity, live from the new identity. And I kept saying, how? So we're going to look at part of that how today, and I'm going to do a whole nother episode on my process that I developed for Thought Leader Academy on building the new identity. And by the way, if you don't already have the Rise roadmap, we created that as a companion to this podcast. Please message me right now before you listen to anything else or do anything else. Just right now while we're on together, put in the comments or DM me on Instagram at Sarah Connell, SARACONNELL, and just message the word RISE, RISE. So we can send you and it's absolutely free, the roadmap, because this is not a podcast about, having some neat ideas and going on with life as usual. It's about making sure you do make your rise to your next summit this year and this month and today. And that involves doing the work along with it. So that's our gift to you, and make sure that you get that right now. Okay, moving on. Tony Robbins, right? He kept saying, I built myself, and I wanted to know, how did you do it, Tony? What did you do? And so he really is talking about, I believe, 2 steps in this rise. I want to break this down to 2 steps that you can analyze between where you are now to your next. That's my dog. And you can analyze from where you are now to your next step and be able to decide if these apply, if these 2 moves that Tony made will apply to you at your next step. Okay, so Tony is, I believe, doing 2 things in this rise, from 17-year-old janitor to becoming a force in the personal growth space, starting to develop his philosophy and his movement. I believe two things are part of this rise. The first part is, let's go to that room. Can you imagine him? If you close your eyes, I can sort of see him in like a jumpsuit, or a janitor's uniform, and with that mop. I'm just picturing him at night, with the mop, sort of like in this quiet, still, building where he's doing this janitorial work. And what he realized is that he'd had no real he'd had not a lot of positive messages growing up, right? If you know his early life story, his mother struggled, according to him, with substance abuse. His, father had a lot of anger, and, they didn't have food at certain times. They didn't have enough food most of the time. This was an environment of poverty and lack, and certainly not a you can do anything sort of motivation. So what I'm really getting at here is that this is the beginning of the rise for him, right? He hasn't had that positive messaging. He doesn't have a lot of resources, right? He's a janitor, not making a ton of money. And he just, something in him, kind of like that same impulse that had me listen to, the Tony Robbins videos driving around, led him to his first mentor, Jim Rohn. Now, this is what's interesting. Before he ever thought about mentorship, he did step 1, which is immersion. He knew that if something in him, and this is what I'm gleaning from interviews and books that he's written and talks that he's shared online, something in him knew that if he kept thinking the same way and having the same conversations and reading the same stuff, nothing was going to change. And so he took he's talked about taking a speed reading course that helped him just start inhaling books. I'm going to look at this stat from one of his interviews. I think it's like 700 books. Yes. So in 7 years, he read over 700 books. So think about that, 100 books a year. That's, it's 2-ish a week. And that was the beginning of his rise. Absolutely. And I call this, what I call it in Thought Leader Academy, is immersion. You got to surround sound ourselves. If we want to go from lack to abundance, we got to be in an immersion of abundance, books, audios, philosophies, thinking, all of those different things. Right. So that's something really important to. So part 1 of 2, the 2 steps I believe were part of Tony's rise at this phase were immersion. So he's 700 books. And let's take a minute to understand 7 years. This wasn't like his fast, get rich quick, whatever. This is like, I'm a janitor and I am immersing myself in the thought leadership of someone, I believe, who's showing me a different way, And then the second step, the second part of this rise is, Tony is very clear on this in many, many books and interviews. The second part is mentorship. He is clear that there is no way he could have advanced out to the heights and risen to the level of contribution that he has if he had not been in training and in mentorship with people that had a next level. They were embodying the next level. So I heard my big breakthrough that summer listening to Tony Robbins videos every day was that my life will reflect the 5 people and groups with whom I spend the most time. And Tony got that directly from Jim Rohn, right? So I benefited from it, from, Tony as the student, but his first mentor, Jim Rohn, who was mentor also to Brian Tracy and a lot of thought leaders of that era, was the one that introduced Tony to that, right? And helped fill his mind. Like, you can't, this is what he says he learned from Jim Rohn. Like, your life will reflect the 5 people and groups with whom you spend the most time, or your life is an aggregate of the 5 people and groups. And that you need to be a guardian of your mind. You need to make sure that what you're putting in, just like food, if you put in Cheetos and, Sprite and a bunch of processed junk, you're going to feel terrible. You're going to have your body and your mind and your everything, your longevity, your happiness, your mental health is going to be affected, right? So these are the 2 moves for Tony's rise that I want us to focus on. Immersion in the thing that you want to become. I think of it as steeping. I wrote about that in one of my books. We're steeping like a tea bag in the universe of, if you want to become more abundant this year, you are going to steep. I'm going to offer you to immerse yourself in the language of abundance through what you read, through what you listen to, the conversations you have, the people you're around. If your goal is to become more impactful, reach more people, change more lives this year, same deal. Reading the stories, listening to the podcast, being around and in the room and being mentored with, and, mentorship is part 2, but immersion first in just, gosh, we have access to everything now online between the podcasts and the YouTube interviews and all the different platforms. So immersion. Are you immersed so far this year with the number 1 goal you have? That's what I want you to think about and take away from today. Are you immersing yourself in books, audios, videos, conversations, peers, rooms, all of that with that goal in mind? If not, that's the invitation, right? While you're doing the dishes, while you're walking the dog, while you're exercising, what are you inputting? And is it aligned with your big goal this year? And sometimes that's really fun and exciting. And sometimes it's like, oh, I don't want to work on my craft in speaking or, immerse myself in, the world of successful books or whatever. I just want to watch, The Bear on Hulu, or I want to watch the next season of Bridgerton or something. And that's great. And you get to still have your fun shows maybe later, but I would offer to you like a food pyramid, right? Let the main base of the food pyramid be immersion. And then number 2 is what's your mentorship look like? So this was really interesting. So Tony his first mentorship was just what he could afford was listening to the thought leadership of Jim Rohn and other thought leaders. Then this is what's interesting. So Jim Rohn really inspired Tony because he came from Idaho, working on a farm. He then was the clerk at Sears, and then, of course, became this 40-year career as a major thought leader. He was a millionaire by the age of 31. He authored 17 books. And Tony invested, I think I read, I'm just going to see if this is correct, $39. It was something around that. And to go in the room to a seminar that Jim Rohn was leading. And this was Tony credits this as a pivotal point in the beginning of his rise. Getting in the physical room, and in this case today we have, the virtual rooms as well, with the mentor. So he went from reading the books and listening to the audio cassettes, I think at that time was the medium, and then being in the room. And that, he said, accelerated his rise, and then went on to have many mentors. I think his next 2, John Grinder and Peter Guber, were the next 2 that he really credits as influencing him in very powerful ways to to both improve himself consistently and build himself into that new identity, but also to go out and share his contributions as a thought leader. Now, I want to swing this around just to one more point. The only way that Tony was able to have that breakthrough is because Jim Rohn and Peter Guber and John Grinder, in this case, actually were courageous and committed enough to show up and write those books and make the audio recordings. And if it was today, we would have been doing social media and video as well, I have no doubt. So the kind of yin yang of this is you are someone's Tony Robbins. You are someone's Jim Rohn. You are someone's next mentor. And the only way they're going to get their aha, their breakthrough, their shift, their change in identity is if they're able to immerse themselves in your work through books, through speaking, through your content, and that they're able to be mentored by you in some, whether you consult, coach, have a methodology, have retreats, whatever it is that you're doing. So all of you in Thought Leader Academy, this is what we do day in and day out, right? That's what we're in here doing. You're creating that content, that thought leadership, those incredible experiences and ways for people to first immerse and then be mentored. So it is crucial that we build ourselves up into the identity of thought leader, into the identity of best-selling author, the identity of in-demand speaker, the identity of seven-figure CEO, whatever it is that's your identity. And if you don't have that like really clarified and honed for you this year, use the roadmap. Just message the word rise and you'll get guided. I'll guide you in that roadmap through the process of claiming that identity and affirming it in a very specific way that works on the conscious and subconscious mind so that you're programmed for your vision. All right, so let's review what we talked about today. Today's focus is Tony Robbins and the link between identity and the rise to global thought leader. And we just looked at the first part of his journey today, which was that I believe there were two key factors from reading all the interviews and watching his stuff, reading his books and being a big fan over the years. Two elements to the first part of his rise. The first was immersion in the possibility, in the yes, in the language of the vision he had, which for him at that time was personal growth and development. Okay. So that's part one. The second was then getting in the room with a mentor and then mentors that were living the vision that he saw for himself. And that's what accelerated him into stratospheric success, rise after rise after rise after rise. We'll look at other elements of his rise, other summits in future episodes, as well as many, many other. We're going to do Jen Gottlieb and Brene Brown and Gabby Bernstein and so many incredible people. So this podcast is not about all these great thought leaders. It's about you. And so the takeaways, my homework for you between now and next episode is to double check that you are in immersion with books, audios, videos, conversations, people, communities that are already living and vibrating in the vision that you want to create your most important goal for this year. Or you can break it down to this 90 days or this month. And then the second is what mentorship? Like, what is the mentorship that you get to have, that you get to give yourself to accelerate so that this is what mentorship has done for me. Investing in the immersion and then the mentorship directly with people who are 7 steps ahead of me, with people who are living the vision that I am hoping to create in their way, and I'm going to do it in my way, has made many, many, many times over a 10-year plan become a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan become a 6-month plan. I had an experience in December of this past year. It's January now, if you're listening to these as they come out. And something that would have absolutely been really more of a 6-month goal for our company 2 years ago, we did in 1 month. We did it in 30 days during the holidays when I was taking 10 days off to have, hang out and relaxing time with my family. So we did in less than a month what would have taken us 6 months. And the only reason that could happen is because I immersed myself in the vision. And then I have mentorship with my coaches and mentors who have already done those things in ways that I can learn from. All right. So I'm excited to hear what resonated with you from today. Please leave a comment. And if you haven't subscribed to the show, please do so that we can continue bringing you this show absolutely for free, bring on incredible guests. I hope that Tony and Gabby and Brene and Jen Gottlieb and all the wonderful people that we're going to be case studying will let me know if I got it right. Alex Ramosi, all of you wonderful leaders, and let me know if these were, in fact, if we're getting the playbook from the interviews that you've put out for those steps in your rise. And please do share this show with a friend that is ready to rise this year. We'll see you next time.